Talk to me about who this is and what you know about him.
Well, this is my grandpa's grandpa, Judd, and he was born in the 1840s, as I remember it. Uh, I don't really know a lot about him. I like the way he looks. I don't know if he was a shepherd or a farmer, but that's what they said most of their occupations were at that time. But he just looks like a leader of a cult. I mean, not a bad cult, but a religious cult or something like that. But I really don't know too much about him other than that. I like the way he looks, and I like his big picture. I've got the big picture in the living room now, and it just seems like it makes the house, gives it more dimension and stuff. So probably that's as much as I have to say about him. No, I remember it from way back, but I couldn't tell you. I know they're the Judds, but I couldn't say what their names are or anything. But I do remember seeing that picture, Mike.
That's the same guy that's on the wall, Mom.
But with his wife?
Yeah, that's him and his wife.
Okay, but that's what I meant. I hadn't seen them together.
Hmm.
But you know what her name was or anything?
I think it was Harriet Dale.
Hmm. And they were born in the 1840s.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and near Birmingham, England.
Yeah, that all sounds like it fits together with what we know.
And he
Well,
was probably a shepherd,
yeah, I hope so.
and his children were scholars.
Scholars, well, children going to school. I know when I first started seeing that paper you had done, and I thought, first of all, I thought, he was a scholar. But then they were all scholars, and they were 6 years old or, 4 or something like that. So I saw they were pretty liberal in that, calling them scholars.
Just means they're students.
Yeah, just they could put student.
So you don't know any stories from the Judds in England? Nothing.
No, nothing.
Wasn't there a ceramic figure of
Oh,
uh,
God.
a person who was like Robin Hood or something
Yeah,
that made it here?
Tom King. Yeah, Tom King. I guess he was an English Robin Hood. But I don't know how he wasn't in the family. That family just had that statue for 500 years or something like that. And I really don't know if he was any part of it, or if they just had that statue. And I guess Janet has it from what you say. Yeah.
So did they ever tell you any stories about that statue?
Just that it was Tom King and that he was a local highwayman. He robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. But I don't even know it. I mean, they may have told me all these things back when, what century and stuff, and I don't remember it anymore.
Just remembered something from what I'd heard. There was a story you told me one time about the old man from the mountain.
Yeah.
So where do you think that came from? Do you think that came from the Judd side of the family or the Bops?
No, I think it was from the Judd's family. And I think it was in our immediate family. Me and Bev were the ones that got scared by that story. Because Bev was sniffling and Mother couldn't get her I mean, that seems like a trivial thing. Mother couldn't get her to stop sniffling. So, was the old man from the mountains? Yeah. So there was a knock on the door at night, and Bev and I went to the door because Mother said answer the door or something like that, and opened the door, and there was this guy with a sheet over him and everything like that, and it was scary looking. Beverly didn't back up though, but I backed up. I was scared, I got behind her, and he said, I hear there's someone here sniffling, or that might not be the actual words, but something like that. And she said, yes. And he said, don't sniffle anymore. We'll be back and it'll be worse. Something like that, yeah. But I think Mom and Dad just made it up because Dad was gone all this time. I don't know if he had a sheet around him. He may have had a sheet around him too or something.
So who do you think was the old man from the mountain?
just a fictitious figure.
No, but was it your father that
Oh,
was
it was
pretending
my
to be
dad.
that?
My
And he
dad
was
playing the
saying that
part.
he was going to take Beverly to the mountain with him?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Well, how old was she then?
Well, we were both little. I mean, I think I was maybe 3 and she was 5, but maybe we were older because that seemed pretty young to scare a child.
4 and 6, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, that's
4.
much better, Mom.
Yeah. But we weren't 8 and 10. You know, we weren't that big. We could have been maybe 5 and 7. I don't know. That's probably as bad as old as I would think we might have been. But it seemed to me I was still very scared and stood behind Bev, and she stood right up to him and said, "No, I won't sniffle anymore," you know, and stuff like that. Yeah, she never backed down.
Did she know it was your dad?
Oh, no. We
Did
didn't
you
know.
guys talk about it afterwards?
No, nobody ever told us. We had to finally figure it out ourselves.
How'd you figure it out?
Found the sheet.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because he had left it in the porch, you know. And so when the sheet was out there, we got a little suspicious of it, you know.
Did you ever tell them you knew?
I think so, or maybe they started talking about it too, somehow. But it may have worked a couple times on it. I don't know if it was just that one time or if that was, but it was because of her sniffling, which wasn't such a bad thing.
Did they ever do anything like that to Johnny?
No, they never treated Johnny like they treated us, yeah. No, they would never do that to Johnny.
The other thought that I had was I'd ask you last night, I think it was last night, what you would have liked to have been if you could have been anything other, any job that you might have wanted to have had if money wasn't the issue, and you really couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Any thoughts on that since then?
Well, yes, I have confirmed to myself that I would have liked to have been a shepherdess in the fields with the lambs and stuff like that, in the clean air, because we used to have shepherds still in the outer district when I was a kid, and it always looked like a good job. And there are shepherdesses. They don't have to be male. They can be female. And that would probably be what I would have wanted to be, and kind of nice because it runs in our family. Yeah.
So if we got you a herd of sheep and put them in your backyard now, is that what you would like?
Yeah, so I don't expect to have you, I come home and see sheep all over my backyard, yeah. But I always like the little black sheep the best, yeah.
Well, that's that. So what is it about that kind of life do you think you would like? Would you like that?
Well, there's no pressure on it, you know, I mean, there's nobody standing saying, that, go get that sheep over there or anything like that. And just you'd be outdoors and it'd be pleasant because you're in the open fields. And, well, I mean, it just sounds all, I mean, I can't believe I'd have to explain to anybody what would be good about it because it just sounds like it's such a natural to me, you know.
Why didn't you ever look into being a shepherdess?
Well, I think that was an earlier dream that by the time I was looking for a job, I don't think they were advertising for shepherdesses, or there wasn't any bulletin board I saw anywhere that said shepherd or shepherdess wanted.
You know, there are still shepherds today in the San Joaquin Valley, herding sheep. I mean, they're probably, larger herds or flocks of sheep, but they actually have a hard time finding enough people to do it. They have a special category for immigration for people to come from Mongolia and someplace else, maybe Peru or something, where they find shepherds to come here because nobody else will do it.
Yeah. That's amazing. See, I thought it was probably a lost art. But, God, I can't think of the guy's name that lived beside Bev. He had one arm. But anyway, he was the one that said shepherds used to camp underneath those big trees, those, I don't know what kind of trees, pecan trees. Those huge pecans that just off of Fresno, where they used to be. I don't know if they were not. And that's where they had their encampments. But I don't know when it was, but no doubt before any of those houses were built there. They just had the big pecan trees to be under. So that's an interesting story.
Well, it's too bad you never found a sheep herd to tend.
Yeah,
That would have been a fun job for you.
it would have been. I would have loved it. But I kind of just thought it was too late for that, you know. And I think actually by the time I graduated from high school, I don't know if I would still be wanting to do that, you know. Well, this is who I knew as Grandma Judd, but this is when she was Mary Mayo, before she was married. I never had any idea she was so beautiful. Well, she was an old grandma, you know, you don't really think about them when they were young. And when I found this picture of her, I was just stunned. And I took it outside. I mean, it was a bigger picture than that. And it was in a frame. And sent it to Ed and said, "Who is this?" And he just said right away, "Oh, that's my mother." Just no explanation, like, wasn't she beautiful or changed before you saw her or something like that, you know. But I just think she's so beautiful. And to think that I don't think she had a very happy life. She was more or less on the farm, and her and Grandpa were separated, and they had split. They had 160 acres, and she had 80 on one side, and he had 80 on the other. And then eventually they gave, my dad got 40 acres in the front, and I guess Ed got 40 acres too. I don't think Bill was still alive then. But I just always felt Grandma had a sad life. And when you look at this woman, you think, here's this beautiful person who could want any more genteel looking and just very nice looking. So that's who that is, Mary Mayo, or my Grandma Judd, a.k.a. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice picture of her.
Yeah, that is. I just knew you were going to bring out Bill next. I was prepared for him. Well, this is my Uncle Bill as a young man, which I never knew him looking like this, you know. He was already been to the First World War, and Grandma Judd thought he got mustard and shell-shocked and all of the things that we have today by other names. And she had him go to bed when he first came home, and told him he was sick. Well, she was trying to help him. She certainly wasn't doing it to be, but she did think he got mustard. And she was kind of the doctor of that neighborhood out there, because Art, that lived behind us, said she doctored the whole neighborhood. She got him over pneumonia. My dad had pneumonia. I had pneumonia. She didn't come in and work on me, but maybe it was in her later life like that. But I'll tell you what I know about Bill. He was just the nicest person you could ever meet. He was so kind and gentle. And Bev and I just hung out with him when we went out to stay at Grandma Judd, because he was always outside with the animals and stuff. And he was very, very quiet at that time. But I had heard that he was the wildest of the boys. Yeah, so he changed a lot, I guess. This may have been when he was still outgoing and stuff like that, because he looked a little more outgoing. And he played a violin uke, and he used to sit down, you played it on your lap, and Bev on one side, me on the other, and he'd play that and sing to us. So that was nice.
He played the ukulele.
Yeah, well, they called it a violin uke, so I don't know. It was a little different, yeah. And he would sing, and Bev and I would just be so enthralled. And then after he took his life, he left that to Bev and I.
Where is it?
Well, Mother threw it out.
Oh.
Yeah. She didn't even let Dad have it in the house. It was in the garage. And then eventually it just got thrown out, because Bev and I did ask her about it. And she said, well, nobody plays it. It isn't worth anything, or something like that. Yeah. I know.
Did anybody ever record him playing?
I don't know. I don't think they didn't have this kind of technology at that time.
Didn't you say that somebody, your dad or somebody, recorded music?
Well, yeah, he did, but it was from those little phone booths you used to be able to put in a quarter,
A
And,
phone booth.
well, it was like a booth in a music place.
So not a phone booth, but a booth where you could go and record
Yeah.
something. Okay. So those don't exist anymore.
No,
So
those are gone now, but I can still remember
huh.
them.
So where would they be? Like in a music store or
They'd
something?
be in a music store, and you did sit in there, and I don't know if you put in a quarter or whatever, but Bev and I used to do it. In fact, we may still have some of those records, but I don't know if they'd play. They were about that big, and they were like silver or something.
So anyway, you think there might be some old cylinders around that might have a recording
Right.
of
Well,
your father.
At that time, there were old cylinders around, and playing the harmonica or something like that, and singing.
Huh. And it would be of your dad
It would be.
if we find it, not Bill.
It
or
wouldn't be Bill. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because I don't know anybody who recorded Bill, I really didn't know him that well, just as an older guy, and he was already in his 40s or
Mhm.
maybe 50s. No, not 50s, because he took his life at 49. But he was probably one of the kindest people I know. Yeah. It's too bad that's what happened. His legacy, that he took his life. Yeah, that's Bill in his uniform, I guess, before he went in service or when he came home. So I'll tell you this story I can remember about him. During the war, the First World War that he was in, nobody had telephones and that kind of connections. And so once a month, they would have a place in the town square or someplace, and everybody, the mothers that had kids in the service, would come in to hear the names of the dead read. And so Grandma Judd went in all the time, and they called out a Bill Budd, and she just knew it was Bill Judd, and then made a mistake. And so she really thought Bill was dead all that time, because they didn't have any instant information, no place you could call and say, was that with a B or a J or what, And so she really did think he was dead. And when my dad and Ed was sleeping in the field, Dad and Ed were sleeping in the fields when Bill came home, and they said he was just perfect. He climbed in under the covers with them. It was summertime, I guess, and they'd been picking grapes, so they just slept out there. And told them all about the war and how beautiful Paris. He always said France was beautiful. And he was in the Oregon forest. That was the war he was in, where the battle of that he went to. And I know he said that he was in artillery, so he was a foot soldier. And by the time he got to the front line and saw that the Germans were tied to their machine guns, and so they had to keep firing. But anyway, it was a cruel thing to do to the Germans, but kind of expect it from the Germans. He was okay, and then he went in the house, and Grandma said, "Oh, Bill, you're sick, and go to bed and lay down." And he just got sicker, and got believing that story, I guess, because that's all I remember of him. And then later on that he was out puttering around in the yard and stuff. But I never.
He lived for years after he came back from the war.
Yeah, because he was 49 when he took.
And he was probably 19 or 20 when he went, right?
Yeah.
So 20 years, what, 29, 39, 49, 30 years may have passed. And was he always working on the farm? He never did anything else?
No, he didn't. And neither did Dad or Ed. The boys were there to help with the farm. That's what they did. I don't know if when he came back, he still went out and ran around, because I heard that he was the wildest one of the boys, So maybe he did some running around for a while, and then she got him. Or I don't mean she got him like that. I'm sure she thought she was doing the best thing for him.
And he never got married?
No. No, he never did get married. And that's a good point, because Ed did get married, and Ed was a lot shyer. Ed was very shy. And Bill was supposed to be wild, but Ed got married and Bill didn't. Who figures?
Yeah.
Because Ed and his wife, I think her name was Margaret, got married the same time my folks did. So that was a double wedding. But all I can say is he was really a nice person and took so much trouble to explain anything that Bev and I asked him. He would be able to explain it to us and take his time. And then he was the one that played the violin uke. So, yeah, he was a nice guy. And this is my dad, but everybody thinks it's a girl because he's got on a skirt and he's dressed like a girl. He has curly long hair. But the truth is, my grandma was always so crazy about him, thought he was so handsome and beautiful, and Hollywood would get him. So she always kept him pretty close to her. And I can see he's cute right there. Good looking, good looking. He was 6 years old at the time that picture was taken. And, well, Bev and I never could believe that anybody would dress a boy like that to make him look like a girl, But times were changed.
So do you have pictures of Ed and Bill dressed like that?
No.
Just your dad, huh?
I know, but I think he was just such a favorite of hers, and she was so afraid Hollywood was going to get him. I mean, if they have pictures of Ed and Bill dressed like that, I never saw them. But you'd think because this was setting up in her house, and she had a big cabinet full of stuff, and she used to take it down and show us all the time, all the different pictures, and she'd wipe them off and clean them off as she was telling you about the story about that person or whatever it was.
Do you remember any of those stories?
No, I just remember it was like going to a movie show, though. You'd have this big cabinet, and a glass cabinet, and she'd open it and take out different pictures and then talk about the different people. But I don't remember any of them,
You don't know what happened to those pictures?
Oh, well, I know what happened, which is a sad story. After Bill took his life, Grandma kind of lost her mind, And so they sent her up to stay with Alice, and so that from then on she was up there. But Ed and Hazel lived in that house, and Hazel was a drunk. She's the one that had the brother that was a merchant marine and gay. That was her brother. But because of that, she had Ed take out all of that whole big cabinet, throw it in the ground in a hole and bury it all. Yeah. So we never got any of those pictures or anything.
Wow.
I think she was probably just drunk, and didn't like those were old pictures. She didn't want them in her house. This was her house now, and she's going to do it. But I mean, actually, she was real funny. She was a character. She's the one and she wasn't good looking. She looked like an Indian, and she had a forehead about this big, yeah. And but she was funny, and her and Dad used to both drink at the same time. So they would be going through the rows, picking the grapes to the end, and they'd have a bottle on the end. And whoever get to the bottle first got to drink the bottle, which was not a really healthy thing to do or anything.
So that property, after Mary Mayo moved to live with her daughter Alice
Yeah,
in Oakland,
yeah,
went to Ed and Hazel,
yeah.
and then 40 acres went to your dad eventually?
Eventually, I don't think he got it right away because I don't remember having that property till the 40s. Bev and I were about 10 and 12 or something. We were old enough to go out, and in the winter, they'd pick up all the dead wood and make fires and get rid of. Anyway, that's how we do it. I don't know if they'd done it before like that. And Dad would get us out of bed at like 4 in the morning to get out there and have a fire. But you asked me about a different question.
The transfer of the property, I was just asking about. So Ed and Hazel lived there for how long after Mary moved out? And did Mary ever move back?
No, Mary never moved back. She moved after that when she started losing her mind. they put her in Stockton, so she died.
I thought it was Napa.
Oh, it was Napa. You're right.
So
Well,
it was a mental facility, health facility.
yeah.
What was wrong with her? Do you know?
I just think she had a wandering mind, probably like mine. I don't know. I mean,
Well, nobody's gonna put you away, Mom,
Yeah.
because you can't remember something occasionally. But so you think maybe she had dementia or Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's, something like that. Because really, she didn't know who she was.
Oh,
And I remember it didn't look like Grandma Judd at all. She was real skinny. She had lost, like me, a lot of weight and stuff like that. And I remember her telling us she didn't talk to anybody because she was talking to everybody as you go in, and they were in locked facilities. And so we were talking to her, and she said, "No, I don't talk to anybody." And then when you saw her go down the road, she stopped and talked to everybody, so, no.
so she. Why did she move up to live with Alice? Because she couldn't cope with running the farm anymore, or was Henry still there, her husband?
No, and they were divorced. He
So they
was-
sort of divided the property
yeah,
he lived.
Right. He had 80 acres this side, and she had 80 that side. And she was on the corner. And then Grandpa's, well, he had changed his, like he had apricot trees and stuff. It wasn't all vineyard. Because there's a picture of me picking apricots from his ranch or from his side of the farm when it was vacant. But in the end, I think Aunt Effie and Grandpa Judd lived there.
Where? Not in the house that they used to live in.
No, that was always her house. That
So
property.
but he had another house,
Yeah, well, he just had. I think I've told you the story before. But
like a chicken coop.
yeah, he lived in the chicken coop with the cats, and that's how he was doing for a long time. When Deb and I would go with him, and we'd sit in the car, and I thought it was nice. He was sitting out there petting the cats, and I remember he fed them all canned cream milk and stuff like that. That's what he had.
You have a lot of cats, or just like a few?
Well, 4, more
Not
than,
hundreds.
More than 2, but not 100, yeah. So he liked cats. But after that, this woman, well, I shouldn't say this woman, she was she found out that there was a man living in a chicken coop out there. And so she got him, cleaned him up, married him, had him build her a real nice house on the other side of the chicken coop. Because we'd drive in here and the chicken coop would be there. And now their house would be over there.
And then he lived in the house with her.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't continue living in the chicken coop.
Well, I don't know if he liked it as much, or, I really don't even know if he was real happy. But when he had his 80th birthday, his wish was to go to Yosemite. So my folks took him up there, and I got to sit beside him in the back. And he was telling me all the stories about how the prisoners broke down in England, how they made their roads, how they broke all the, do you remember when we were in England?
Cobblestone.
Cobblestones, right. And that was what Grandpa Judd was telling me about at that time.
That was probably pretty much near the end of his life then.
Yeah, well, a couple years later, because I think he died. Well, now I'm getting mixed up with who died. Because just after I got married, I was thinking it was Grandpa Judd that died. But maybe it was Grandma Judd. But all of the relatives came down to our house because he was buried out in the cemetery in Easton.
Effie Elliott.
Yeah, Elliott. See, I had forgotten her last name.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, both Ed and I tried to think of her last name when we were telling you who
Mhm.
we married.
Mm-hmm.
It was Elliott.
Elliott.
I'm glad you've got it on there.